It is 6 p.m. and this is Comedy Centered. Hope you had or are having a great weekend. I did a lot of nothing, which was kind of what the doctor ordered. I've been definitely doing a little bit too much thinking. And I came across in my ratings, a term I hadn't heard before. And it's called enmeshment trauma. Now, enmeshment trauma is a specific kind of a dysfunctional relationship. Now, I'd never heard this before, but it rang specifically very true for myself and for my own experiences within my family, right? So basically, enmeshment trauma, like I said, is a dysfunctional relationship dynamic. It happens within families. It can happen with other people as well, okay? But generally, families. And this is a dynamic where boundaries are very blurred. It can happen in a cult. There's an example. Boundaries are very blurred, and individual identities aren't necessarily totally developed, okay? Basically, there is a disregard for individualism and individuality within any particular group. Like, through this, though, there is a loss of autonomy for the individual. There's generally one person, kind of the driving force, usually the adult if we're talking about a parent-child situation, that is basically someone who's overly intimate. You almost have like an emotionally undeveloped parent that is overly relying on the child to meet their emotional needs, to help regulate their own emotional stuff, because they're not capable of it, right? Just because you can become a parent doesn't mean you're actually, right, capable of it. Like, you might not have all the skills you need anyway. But enmeshment is basically emotional power. It's a way to manipulate. And what this enmeshment does is it creates a narrative where the family itself is more important, the group itself is more important than the individual person, your individual identity, right? The family is the important thing. And whoever the head of the family is, could be a matriarch, could be a patriarch, could be two. There could be more than one, right? But the family's always first. And so there's little regard, little encouragement for people to express any kind of emotions or feelings or political beliefs or religious beliefs or educational beliefs, probably different than the dynamic that has been set forth by that family, by that enmeshment. And if you feel very attached in enmeshment to your family, obviously we want to be close with our family, but this is something that is an extreme closeness. There are very low levels of autonomy for the individual members in this group. It's too close. There are very high levels in these situations of inappropriate intimacy. You can imagine a situation where maybe an adult is oversharing personal problems with their child, but also that it's a manipulation to use the child in that way so that the child becomes almost like the sounding board for the adult, and then the child, of course, wants the love and the praise of a parent, so they're going to mirror back and say, oh yeah, of course, oh, he's a jerk, why didn't he call you back? You're the best mom, you're the best girl anybody could ever date, whatever it is. There's no autonomy. What the head of what the person who's kind of charging the enmeshment wants, they convince you that that's what you want too. You want what I want because you are an extension of me. We're together. We're the family. So whatever's good for me is good for the family, and whatever's good for the family is good for you, if that makes sense. So they gave us a little bit of a list of like some indicating signs, And again, I hadn't done a ton of research onto this, but I really did kind of like this author's point. So again, I'm just going to rattle off some of the things that they were citing as signs of maybe an enmeshment trauma. Because we do talk about enmeshment. I guess I haven't talked about enmeshment, but as soon as I thought enmeshment trauma, in my mind, it equated being an enabler. Like enabling someone, like as we use in the context of like recovery and Al-Anon and all that kind of stuff. But enmeshment trauma is a bit different, okay? So 7 signs that you may be in a situation where maybe you're a little too enmeshed. If there is a lack of boundaries. Now, but I mean, what the author was saying in their examples was a lack of boundaries. For example, you can't ever be in the bathroom by yourself without someone coming knocking on the door. You can't have privacy. You can't, they'll read your diaries. You can't write things down. Maybe the lack of boundaries equates to, and this is related, I think this is the 3rd sign, but a complete lack of privacy. Of course, if you've got a child who is a teenager or something like that, of course you're going to want them to share their location with you on your phone. But this lack of privacy goes farther than that. You don't have alone time in your room. Your room is not your own private place. Anything you have is also theirs, so they can also go through it, all right? This is that enmeshment. Everything is all enmeshed, right? Let's see what was else on the list. You often are made to or naturally do feel responsible for your parents' feelings and their moods. Parents of poor mental health, too, will often rely on the children to be their self-worth, in the sense of supporting them and listening to them and consoling them, sure, but also elevating them and holding them up as when you do well as the child. Like, ooh, look at this wonderful accomplishment that we got. We got as the family, the enmeshed family. This is our win, right? Lack of privacy, we talked about that. Avoiding conflict. You may be so afraid of being blamed for something or fear of losing intimacy with that parent that you start learning early on the best way to deal with maybe the mood swings or the anger or the things you don't quite understand is just to avoid conflict. One of the things I've learned about myself is the things that, and I believe it's true of others because I've seen it in other writings and that, but the things that you avoid, you think in the short term, your anxiety is lessened by avoiding something unpleasant. Let's say you have a trigger, you had a bad experience at a car wash, just to pick something. And ever since that bad experience at a car wash, you don't go to car washes anymore. You don't wash your car at all, which is fine until your car starts rusting because you didn't get the winter salt off of it and now the car's starting to fall apart. The same can happen by avoiding conflict. If you're constantly just avoiding the energy and avoiding the conversation and avoiding the conflict, it doesn't resolve itself in you. You don't feel any better about the situation, and more importantly, you just reinforce your neural pathways to say we can avoid these things, we can avoid stressors, we can avoid triggers completely. And the more you rely on avoidance as a strategy to being healthy and happy, you can kind of see where that, you can kind of end up chasing your own tail. Trying to avoid conflict, you'll end up going nowhere. You'll end up being agoraphobic. Yeah, there's no conflict, but you're also not living. So, let's see. Lack of identity outside of the family. Oftentimes children of enmeshed families, when they go off to college or maybe off to the service or they're going on and about their lives, they don't have the family unit as present on a daily. They struggle with their own lack of identity because the what do I want to say? The worship of the group, the worship of the family, the worship of the unit or whatever, and the prioritization of the community over that individual. Once the individual is removed from that particular community or situation, they really don't have a clue. And That particular one really, really hit home for me because I remember going to college when I was 18. And a lot of the things that are being described very much happened in my family. Both sides of my family. My family was divorced, but there were instances of this enmeshment on both sides. And without getting into too much detail. But I really didn't know who I was outside of being either in one house the kid who was always in trouble, or in the other house the kid who was always the good kid. I was never the golden child or the scapegoat. I would flip back and forth depending on what house I was. And so would my brother. His roles would flip as well. So I know I struggled with that. Figuring out who am I without all these other voices. When people stop telling you, when you get criticized and told what to do every moment of the day, it's kind of like being incarcerated for too long, and then you get out and without someone bossing you around, you really don't know what to do. So there's that. Let's see. Complicated interpersonal relationships can be a result of an enmeshment trauma that you have from childhood. Well, and that makes sense. You're going to have difficulty trusting people because you kind of couldn't trust the family unit fully. And when you did try to express who you were in your own family unit, because of the overriding loyalty to autonomy and to the family, you maybe when you express it, you're like, Mom, I want to dye my hair a crazy color, or I don't like country music. I want to learn how to play music, but I want to learn a violin, or I want to learn something different. These things aren't accepted. So you don't trust. You're not allowed to act out and express how you individually feel about things. So it's pretty easy to see when you're going into adult relationships. It's tough. It's tough to show up as you are. Yeah. And a lot of people actually have a stunted romantic partnership or situation, I guess. I'm trying to think of a careful way of saying it without making anybody feel bad, but oftentimes people will just say, forget it, and just they'll have no relationship of a romantic level with a partner. The enmeshment is so deep, they'll just continue to get all of their emotional needs met through the family and the family members, and they're just going to stay right there. And this can go on and on and on and on, right? So, in these enmeshment situations, particularly in family dynamics, it seems like it falls into 4 kind of groups. There's about 4 different kinds of parenting that are pretty prevalent within this enmeshment trauma. One is the romanticized parent. This is a little bit of a triggery subject, so I'm just going to put a caveat in there. But this would be something that would fall into the range of like an emotional incest, not necessarily an actual, but the adult is going to the child for emotional intimacy. They treat the child sometimes as a romantic partner or as a best friend. They're basically taking they're lacking an adult relationship in their own lives, and so they're using the child to be a stand-in for that other adult. Helicopter parenting. We all know too, the first child you watch like a hawk, the second, third, fourth child, maybe not as like hyper vigilant about the security, right? Being a good parent, wanting your children safe, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being an involved parent. I don't want to discourage that. But sometimes this helicopter parenting style can actually be a ruse. It can be a manipulation where they're saying, well, I need to look in your phone for security. I need you to not have privacy. You can't keep secrets from me. You have to tell me everything because it's for safety. It's for your own security. It's for your own good. Well, in a situation like that, when a child is growing up, it's healthy for them to have certain things that they keep to themselves. That's okay. It's not a negative reflection on you as a parent. Actually, it's a good thing, because that means they're growing up into their own individual person. But if you're in an enmeshment situation, helicopter parenting, it might look like these are just amazing parents that are just all over it. Like, they're at every kid's game, they're at every play, they're at everything. But are they there in support of the child, or are they there in control of the child? Are they there because they want to make sure the child isn't saying anything negative about them or negative about the family, when they're out in public? Are they there to control the child? In an enmeshment trauma situation, it seems like that's more of the underlying motivator than actually the safety of the kid, right? Okay. Scapegoating and favoritism, I think we're all familiar with that concept, right? The reason why they've got that in there as far as the enmeshment is that that's and we've also talked about it in family dynamics and group dynamics, that can shift around. And I even just talked about it in one situation. Let's say you've got siblings. You're usually the golden child. You're usually the one in the family that everybody holds up in praise, right? But then all of a sudden, you're kind of goofy little brother who is generally just kind of a carefree person or whatever, all of a sudden had a brilliant idea, has started their own company, and oh my God, they're making a ton of money. And now they're the golden child, and you're not the golden child anymore. So what are you going to do? Are you going to take that opportunity to go, oh, woof, well, now I can get out of this enmeshment situation with my family. The spotlight's on them. They'll love that for a while. I'll just back myself out and protect myself and get my head back on right. No, man, you're not letting it go. You're not letting your little brother steal the shine from you. You're now going to get competitive with your little brother. You're going to now be vying from that, for the parents' attention. You're going to want to get back to your original pecking order, the original status, right? And these things can be, children can obviously be played off of each other, so that there's this constant circus around the enmesher or the leader of the family of like, who loves me more? Who's going to get my favor tonight? Who's my best friend? I feel like I cracked open a little sliver of something from my own past, kind of reading through this. Oh, so one of the things part of why I was going into the original talk, see, this is how it is with the ADHD too. I even though I make the notes, anyway. But I was reading up about hormone levels and how these affect our different statuses, our homeostasis, how this affects our reactions to things and all that good stuff. And cortisol, if you're not familiar, cortisol is a hormone naturally secreted in our own bodies. And what it really does is it turns proteins into energy, it regulates our blood sugar, it regulates our blood pressure, but it also regulates our immune systems, okay? Cortisol is key in regulating our immune system, and our immune system is our body's ability to fight off, foreign, things and diseases and all that good stuff, right? Well, undiagnosed trauma, untreated trauma, unprocessed trauma, whether it be PTSD, CPTSD, any kind of childhood problems, medical, like if you were a child that was really sick all the time and you had to have a lot of invasive medical stuff, things like that, your cortisol levels may be ratcheted up higher and stuck at a higher level than they should be naturally. And in instances where that's happening, it can actually hijack your immune system and deplete your body's ability to fight off immune-related disorders. And they have shown that, PTSD is more common in women than men. It occurs at roughly twice the rate. And when you have complex PTSD, and it's gone on for years and years, and generally it started in childhood, you will often have abnormally high cortisol rates and levels in your body for a lifetime. So if you do not take the time to unpack some of this stuff and do the work and analyze some of these problems, it leads to a lot of bad stuff. Obviously, like alcohol misuse, bad relationships, bad decision making, all that kind of stuff. But the actual cortisol immune system correlation, that's why they're finding that the more common denominator with people that are suffering from autoimmune disorders, often if the clinician or the doctor is keen enough, if they ask about childhood trauma or past trauma, there's usually a great deal of it and unprocessed as well. That doesn't mean people that get autoimmune disorders had a bad childhood. It doesn't mean that. But there is a correlation between abnormally high cortisol levels, which will happen in situations of prolonged or repeated stressful situations. Your body's just going to create more of that hormone, that fight or flight hormone, because it's constantly trying to assess whether a situation is dangerous. And a lifetime of those higher cortisol levels, what the body has to do to keep those cortisol levels high, it's got to burn more proteins into energy. It's got to burn more sugar. It's got to regulate those things. And the functions that drop off is the regulation of your own immune system. So even though it's not necessarily fun to start analyzing a lot of this stuff or looking at our own past, looking at childhood dynamics, and trying to figure out where, because Comedy Centered started as, my little accountability measure as I was trying to go alcohol free. But my alcohol misuse is for sure a coping mechanism I've used too often, right? To numb out of my own unprocessed crap. And whether you process it or not, it goes on affecting you. There's a Buddhist phrase that the things that you want to do in life, the things that you want, you have to imagine your mind is almost like a house. And your house has a basement. And these things you want to do with your life, these things you want to go for, these things you want to try, these adventures you want to have, you keep throwing them in your basement. You keep throwing them in a basement saying, well, not now, or maybe someday, or I don't know, or I don't trust myself. But even the stuff you throw in your basement, even the stuff in your real house or in your mental house, even the stuff you throw in the basement, shut the door and don't look at, it still goes on influencing you. It's still in your house. You still know that. So sometimes it's hard to open up that door to the basement and go look at some of the stuff. But if you really think about the things that you want to do in life and you think about what's limiting you from trying and having faith in yourself, it might be that you need to look back and look a little deeper and honor the little you, the internal version of you, the inner child of you, and try to honor them by forgiving them, forgiving yourself, knowing you did what you had to do to survive what you survived, but also knowing that just avoiding, just evading, tuning out, numbing out, sitting on the internet, drinking a bottle of booze, all those things, all that avoidance, it catches up. It's probably increasing your cortisol levels. And as we go through life, the journey of life, the decisions we make at critical points become more and more serious. So if you've recently been diagnosed or told that maybe you are at risk for an immune disorder or things of that nature, do some research. Again, Gabor Mate, Dr. Gabor Mate is someone I've recommended numerous times. But he has some really groundbreaking work on the relationship between trauma and disease. And I encourage you to, take a moment, check out his work. So that's kind of what I had. Fun, light topic, nothing like a little enmeshment trauma to keep your Sunday rolling, right? I hope you guys enjoyed that. I know I was kind of rambling a little bit at the end, but I bring these things up because A, they interest me, and B, I'm working a lot of this stuff out in front of you guys in real time, so obviously sometimes I'm picking subjects that I can that ring true for me. So if you're watching past episodes, if you've engaged with me online, if there's subjects that you think I should talk about, or things that maybe there's a book you've read that you think would be helpful, something that you've gleaned, an article that you think I should highlight, send it to me. I would love to get that information. And I'm always looking to learn and bring new stuff to you guys. Oh my God. Thank you, Miss Jules. You have a great week too. And happy Halloween coming up. So I'll see all you ghosts and goblins after Halloween next week. And we'll be back in a week next Sunday at 6 p.m. Central.